All right, everyone. Thank you for being here on your Friday night. We are very excited. We're here live from Helping Our Music Evolve. Going to do something that is maybe a little out of the ordinary for Underground Music Collective, but nonetheless very important, especially with the season that we're heading into, the holiday season. So we, as you can see behind me, are presenting a Grief and the Holidays workshop with Michelle Ramirez of Hope for Grievers Bereavement Education. And the reason this is important is because, of course, as creative people, we all have outlets, right? And we all have ways to express what we're going through. But this also helps us do the deeper work that is very important and often gets overlooked. So very excited to have Michelle here with us tonight. And we are, of course, because we're Underground Music Collective, going to have a musical tribute to those we've lost at the end of the program. So, Michelle, come on up.
Thank you so much. And I am very honored and excited to accept this opportunity and to share. And so a little bit about me. I have been doing grief work since 2008, and I am Hope for Grievers Bereavement Education, and I support organizations that need, their families need to be supported with grief support. Maybe they need help building a program or just need some additional grief support for their families. So I support families through Hope for Grievers and through the organizations I serve. I also have community service, and so I have been serving my church's grief ministry since 2008. And my experience includes supporting parents, supporting those who have experienced the loss of a loved one to suicide, victims of crime. And so I have been supporting families in different settings for many years. But I became an expert in grief myself following the loss of loved ones at an early age. So in my teens, I lost friends who took their life. I also lost I never lost a child personally, but my family did. And so I have seen, that devastating impact of the loss of a child on a family. And she was 11 and I was 18. And then also have, lost my father suddenly when I was 27 and he was 48. And so that impacted me greatly, and I knew I needed to seek support for myself. And in seeking that support, I gained, coping skills. And so I feel like that made me more of an expert than my training, my education. But just going through that, journeying with others, has really given me that personal insight. So I would like to share with anyone. I always want to let them know if you are in the middle of grief, if you are in the middle of an active loss, this may feel uncomfortable. It may feel, sometimes people don't want to participate in anything because they're like, well, it's going to hurt. It is going to hurt. But it's also an opportunity to seek support. So I did include some contact information for me that, you need to be connected with a local resource. And but I always like to start, even though we're going to be talking about grief and how it impacts us around the holidays, I love to share what grief is, because sometimes we don't know what it is. We may be experiencing it, but we don't know what it is. And so I love to share what grief actually is. So as you can see, there is a definition, and it is a reaction. Grief actually is how we react to the death of a loved one. It's also the way we react to the loss of something. It can be a non-death loss. But today we're going to be talking and focusing on those that when we lose someone. It's also how we react physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So you could be experiencing all of that at the same time following the death of a loved one. And so it can be very painful. You can feel the pain in your physical body. You can feel sick, but aren't necessarily sick. But I always tell everyone, if you feel really bad physically, get it checked out, because the stress of grief can cause flare-ups of any type of physical or emotional or mental illness that you may have. So it's always great to check things out anyway. But it will impact you physically. So you might feel more tired, you might feel more energy. You know, sometimes this energy that you're not used to as well, because you're just racing and racing. But your mental health will definitely be impacted. You'll have emotions that maybe you've never experienced. You know, maybe you've experienced sadness, but not quite like this. This is a new kind of sadness when someone you love has died. Then there's mourning, and when we mourn, you know, because we hear those terms, you know, interchangeably. You know, I'm grieving, I'm mourning. I'm in a, you know, I don't know what to do. I just never felt like this before. But it's helpful to understand what you're going through. And mourning is when you are adjusting to life without the person that has died. You are adjusting to life without them physically in your life. And that hurts like hell. And it begins the moment they die. We begin to adjust to life without them, and it hurts, you know, because they may be part of our routine. They might be part of our daily routine, but they may have been part of our routine maybe years ago, but they're still not physically with us anymore. And so mourning hurts, and we have to gain coping skills to learn how to live without our loved ones. And then there's bereavement. And bereavement, I never knew what bereavement was. And now, of course, I love that I so much that I included it in my name, Hope for Grievers, bereavement education. And bereavement is the situation that their death has created for our life. And so we may be in a season of bereavement. We're learning to adjust. We're learning to cope. We're learning to adapt. And sometimes there's some names for that situation we encounter and find ourselves in. Like if someone has lost a spouse, they may be called a widow or a widower. And so that includes its own set of experiences. And so that situation, you know, is our bereavement. You know, when we lose a child, there's not a formal name for it. But the loss of a child, you know, only another parent that's grieving the loss of a child can understand that season of bereavement, that environment, that experience. And so it's really helpful to understand those as we enter the holiday season and begin to grieve, mourn, or find ourselves in a season of bereavement. And so, and you may start grieving someone later. You might start right away and start going through and processing this and feeling it, the impact of it. But sometimes we've experienced a death loss many years ago, and we finally find that we need to give it the attention it needs. And so that is helpful to understand. And then next, you know, just to understand the physical, again, the mental, emotional, the spiritual life. You know, the physical body, it feels. You know, you might think, well, grief is just all in the emotions, and it's not. We can feel physical pain when our heart is broken, whenever our emotions are raw and numb. Our bodies can feel tired and all of that. So it's helpful to understand that all of this can be impacted at the very same time. And then spiritual, that can be religious or non-religious. So spiritual can be religious. It can affect your relationship with God or your relationship with your faith. It can also be non-religious when you're considering, you know, the meaning of life, you know, the meaning of death. You know, what do I believe about death? What do I believe about life? Where is my loved one after they physically die? And so that is spiritual, but not necessarily religious. And so these are all things that are happening to us at the same time. And no one teaches us how to manage all of this. And so that's why sometimes we do choose unhealthy ways of coping and managing our grief because we don't know how. So then, why is it that at the holidays, we find ourselves, let me just get that slide. Why do we find it? We're just going to resume the slideshow. There you go. Okay. Yeah. So, why is the grief greater at the holidays? And I always like to include about COVID because even though it's been 4 years, some of us are still experiencing the remnant and the impact of losses from COVID because we really didn't get that opportunity to grieve. But why is it? Just ask yourself, why is it that grief is greater at the holidays? Why is it that it feels stronger? This is a time that's supposed to be the happiest time of the year. We have traditions and we have memories of how we spent our holidays with, our loved ones, even if it was when we were younger, even if it's when they were younger or we were younger. And so it may have been from a while back. Also, there is, this expectation that we put on ourselves. We put this expectation that I have to have everything perfect, and I have to, make sure that this looks okay, even if they're gone. It needs to feel exactly the same. We put this pressure on us. Also, there's sometimes financial, strains on us. The death of a loved one can create a financial stress on people. And then at the holidays, you have all these expectations as well, financially with gifts or with celebrations, with parties and things. And so I think that's what makes it harder around the grief time, around the holiday. Also, what can make it harder is when you are off of work. So some of us take vacation around the holidays, and ordinarily our work, our schedules can keep us occupied, and maybe we can avoid our grief for a little while. But when you're off, you have time to relax and be with your thoughts and be with your emotions, be with your memories, or be with those spaces that don't include your loved one. And so you can really be aware of their absence this holiday season. And so that's why it can also be greater. And again, like I mentioned, I like to include about COVID because we were isolated during the pandemic, and some of us are just now catching, our breath, our life back. It's been, some time, but we didn't get to maybe have a funeral service. Maybe we didn't get to have a last holiday. We didn't get to have, because those were such unexpected deaths. And so I have found that even just now in this holiday season, many people are just starting to grieve what they experienced in the pandemic. And some of those pandemic losses were multiple family members. And so that impact is so great because we were isolated from each other. We couldn't honor our loved ones, maybe how our tradition and our culture allows us to at the funeral time or at the in a religious settings. And so now people are beginning to have that added stress. Also, there may be follow-up impact. Maybe someone is still sick, or someone has some physical conditions as a result, and they're having to deal with that as well as the grief. And so this holiday may include some of that pandemic stress, some of that loss that we're just now being able to to honor and to also cope and manage. And then, as you can see, there are some things that we actually have to be honest with ourselves in order to heal. So one thing, we have to acknowledge that we are hurting. We have to acknowledge that our holiday has changed. And it's not easy to do that because sometimes we go and do everything we can to make sure it stays the same. And we're like, we need to make sure. We need to make sure it stays the same. We need to make sure nothing changes. I'm going to do everything to ensure it stays like it was before. So we have to acknowledge that it has changed. We can't heal if we don't acknowledge, It's kind of like when, we start growing up and, as a parent, I'm a parent, and then I'm just kind of like, wow, my kid is in high school. But I'm still thinking, well, I still see them like when they were in kindergarten, they're a little kid. Well, I'm not going to respect them as a teenager if I don't acknowledge that they've changed and become this teenager. I'll still be babying them like a little kiddo. And it's the same with our grief. We have to acknowledge our life is not the same. And there's some pain in acknowledging that. We have to acknowledge things are not the way they used to be. The other thing is we have to acknowledge is that we want to skip the holidays, right? I don't feel like celebrating. I just want to be sad. Sometimes we will acknowledge that we're sad. We miss them. The holiday can't be the same. We finally are acknowledging that. And so I just want to skip the holidays. And so we might not be able to skip the holiday. On a calendar we can't. But acknowledging, at least being honest with ourselves and saying, I'm kind of going through the motion, that helps us as well so we can heal. The other is that we need to plan in advance. And we need to acknowledge that we're going to plan in advance. That way when we get to that holiday, and again, the holiday is different for everyone. It could be, Halloween is a holiday that a lot of people look forward to and celebrate with their loved ones. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah. There's so many different holidays. It could be your birthday. What is your holiday? It's those special days that are different than every ordinary day. So it could be a personal holiday, like a graduation or, an anniversary. And so these we have to prepare and plan. That way it eliminates any of that added stress. And some of that added stress could be, that a family member, they're celebrating that same day or acknowledging that same day, and they have a different plan than you. And so if you don't plan it, you're going to come to that day, and then you're going to have this added stress of conflict. So the other thing we have to acknowledge is that coping with the holidays is difficult, and that you might feel alone. Your faith, again, remember we mentioned it could be impacted. You could say, where's God? I feel alone. You have to acknowledge that. And who likes to? No one. I don't. I didn't like saying, I'm alone. This feels awful. It hurts. But I needed to do that. I don't know what to do with this love I still feel for my loved one. And that's a big one, because when someone dies, our love doesn't die. Our feelings, our emotions don't die. Our anger doesn't die. We might have been in a fight with them, and they die, and that anger is unresolved, and we don't know what to do with it. Now, of course, the love usually overcomes it, but those emotions, they create such a mess in our head, don't they? And so what do we do with it? I don't know what to do with it. But you can't heal if you don't acknowledge that you don't know what to do with it. And so I know one thing we can't do with it. We can't make it disappear. The other thing is self-care. This helps me heal. In my journey, it helps me heal, and it's not easy, and we don't feel like doing it when it happens, but we have to. It will help us heal quicker It will not help us heal quicker. It will help us heal, period. The other thing is the real meaning of our holidays. Is it our faith? Is it our family? Is it generosity? Is it love? What is at the root of your holiday? Your loved one may have been a huge part of it, but what was the root and the foundation of that holiday? Was it religious? Was it generosity? Was it love? Was it tradition? What was at the root? And usually that holiday will still be that. It just won't include the physical presence of your loved one, which hurts. But this can, if we acknowledge that, it can be helpful in our healing. So I love that. And then the other thing is just acknowledging that we want them here. It's okay to wish they were here. Even years later, weeks later, months later, it's okay. Next is also the 3 C's. I love the 3 C's. And I am not one for telling people how to do grief, how to heal. I feel like everyone's journey is different. But there are some things that can be helpful and that are proven to be helpful through research, through experience. And so these are some things that have been proven to be helpful. But I'll never give you a 10-step, 2-step, 3-step, because they're really, it's different things that can help. We just have to make sure that we're choosing healthy ways of coping. There's a lot of unhealthy ways, but we want to find something that is healthy and helpful. So these are the 3 C's for coping with the holiday grief. And Dr. Kendoka, who's amazing, this was featured in his work, and I have since shared it because it's so helpful. But choosing is one of the C's, and I love it because this is personal. I'm going to choose. But we want to make sure we're choosing something good and something helpful. But it gives you a little control of your life, too. And so whenever you've had a loss, especially if it's especially tragic and traumatic, you feel out of control. And so having the power to choose really gives you some of that control back. But again, you want to choose something healthy and helpful. How do you know if it's healthy or helpful? Anyone have any ideas? We need to ask ourselves, does this cause harm to me or others? Does this have a negative consequence? Am I going to get in trouble for this? Does this keep me reliving and re-experiencing that trauma? And so those are some things that we can ask if this is healthy or unhealthy. And so if it's harmful to you or others, then no. If it has a negative consequence, it's not healthy. And so, but you want to be able to choose the activities you're going to participate in. So maybe, this holiday, you don't want to have a big gathering. You want to have a smaller gathering. Or you want to be alone, as long as you do it safely. But you want to choose what you want to participate in. You want to make those in advance. Choose, I'm going to go to that party at work or I'm not. But you want to choose in advance. The next thing is that you want to communicate. So you have that right to choose, but you have to understand that there may be people that are in your close-knit circle that may be impacted by your decision. So it's always great to choose, but then there's the consequence of who's impacted by my decision and my choice, even a healthy one, even if it's a good choice. But it still may impact someone. And so that can create conflict. And we want to avoid added conflict and added stress. So we want to communicate in advance. So for example, Thanksgiving, you know, who is it? Maybe the person that always cooks the turkey has died. And you have already chosen that you want to go out to eat. But maybe a sibling already chose that they were going to take over that role of cooking, but they didn't tell you. And now you can see these siblings might get offended. Well, how could you not want to keep this tradition? Well, how could you want to step into that role so fast? And you see there's now this added conflict. It can affect that relationship. That's not good, because there's an added negative consequence, added stress. And so having a talk in advance could probably change that outcome, if the parties respect each other and the way they grieve. Hey, I know they always cooked the turkey. I was thinking about trying to cook it this time. I have the recipe. I was thinking we should go out to eat. It would be easier. We wouldn't have to worry about missing them this year or remembering, and maybe we can do it again next year. And then now this conversation starts, and with respect, they could come to a compromise, which is our third C. Let's compromise. Okay, why don't we go out to eat? But next year, I'm going to try the turkey. Is that okay? Yes. And so that can eliminate so much. And I'm not going to say that it's easy, because it's not. It is not. It is easier said than done. But it is easier to have this choosing, communicating, and compromising than huge family conflict, huge stress, and sometimes it results in people not talking for a while. That is awful. And now you have this added stress. And then if you have kids involved, they don't get to see their cousins. I mean, I've seen this. And so I always tell people this is hard, and it can sometimes be humbling. And so I share an example in my own life. And when my grandmother died, and I'm grandma's girl. I love my grandma. She died in early December, several years ago now. But she died, and she had been hospitalized for a couple of weeks, so we didn't have time to plan Christmas. But literally, we had like maybe 10 days before Christmas after her funeral. And I did not want to decorate. I didn't want to put the tree up. I didn't want to do anything. I just didn't feel like it, because I was hurting, and I had been very involved in her care and visiting her and in her funeral planning. So I just told my husband, I don't want to put up the tree. I don't want to decorate. I don't want to do anything. Well, in our home, we have a time where we all get together and just decorate our tree. It's just part of our family tradition. And even now with grown kids, they come in from out of town, we were going to try and all be together to decorate our tree. And I did not want to. I just didn't have the energy. So I did this right. I chose what I wanted to do. I communicated with someone, but I didn't communicate with all impacted. I just communicated. Well, then my kids did not agree with that. They wanted the tree, and they felt they really needed that. They needed that because my grandmother loved Christmas, and this was a holiday that was very special to her. And, we had a whole family, extended family party and gathering for Christmas. It was so special. And so my children wanted that tree and actually needed the tree. And so it created some stress and some hurt feelings that we didn't need. And I think we could have compromised. We ended up compromising anyway. We ended up coming to an agreement, and we put up the tree, but we just put we didn't put all the fancy ornaments that we normally did. We kind of did it with the boring balls. Just the boring ones, just to add some color, just to have a tree. And we end up compromising anyway. So why not do it in advance of the conflict? Just try that. Just try, in spite of our pain, in spite of our needs, let's ensure we all address each other's needs and come to a compromise. And I guarantee you, it will be easier, not easy, but easier than a conflict. And it can also be a time of sharing and supporting one another and celebrating our loved one that is not with us. And it's really can be very special. So don't forget the C's, the 3 C's. Sorry if I coughed on your mic. And you heard that. So here is a way. Now, I am kind of a nerd. And so I thought this was helpful to have those conversations. I was like, I'm going to put it on paper. I'm going to give you a little planning guide of some of the way this conversation could turn out and the questions you need to ask yourself as you plan. Because I have supported grieving families for a long time. And I love my work, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. And it's an honor and a privilege. But these are some of the things that we tend to not plan in advance and can cause a lot of conflict. And so I put on here some of the holiday activity or task, and you have to ask yourself, without this activity or task, will my holiday feel less special? Well, for me, the holiday was not going to feel less special if I didn't have the tree. But for my kiddos, it was. So you see how the questions and the answers can be different for everybody. So it can look different, it can sound different, it can feel different for everybody. So that's why we have to compromise and communicate. Is this a task that's obligation? Is it a tradition of ours? Is it a habit? Is it just something I want to do? And so those are things we ask ourselves. Is this a habit? Is it a tradition? Well, for me, the tree was a tradition. I did normally enjoy it. And so I didn't feel obligated to. That's why it was easy for me to kind of not have to do it. But these are some things that we just need to ask ourselves. The other question is, do I enjoy it? And yes, I normally did enjoy that. My kids definitely enjoyed it. And then do you want to pause it? Or do you want to eliminate it? I wanted to pause it that year. I didn't want to cancel having a tree every year. I just didn't want to have it that year. And so those are some questions to ask. And then, are there any changes? So we ended up having changes. Again, we just went with the boring balls instead of all of the beautiful, emotional ornaments, the special ornaments that just really, you cherish. And so we did change it up. And then who's going to help you complete that activity and that task? And so those are the times that you have to ask yourself when you're choosing what you want to do and participate. Because if no one's going to help you, what if financially you can't afford it? Because there was a funeral, because, there's a less income because someone has died. And then you're still trying to complete a task, but you don't have any help. I'm going to cook the whole meal because I don't want anything to change, and I have to do it, but you can't afford it. And now you're going to add more stress. So I love all of these questions. And then here's just some examples of things that could come up. Decorating, giving gifts, attending services at your church or temple, work parties, Christmas cards. Maybe you're that family that always does a photo on your holiday card. Um, how are you going to handle that? Do you want to continue doing that? Do you want to, have the photo without the person? Or do you want to send a different card this year? So we don't think about all of these things and the stress that they put on us, or can, if we don't plan in advance. So that's really helpful. The other thing is, okay, I can be a little dramatic as well. Rescue plan. But you know what? Grief is hard. Trauma is hard. Loss is hard. And so sometimes we definitely need rescuing. And so don't even worry about drama. This is real. And we see it every day, and in the music community, musicians, and I have lived with one myself, musicians are so creative and so vulnerable. Lyrics, emotions, feelings, creatives, you just can be so real about feelings. I love that. But it's helpful to understand and to know that we sometimes need rescuing, and we need to be honest when we need help. We have heard so many stories. We have seen it in our own lives, in our own friends and family. We've seen it. And we need self-rescuing sometimes. So just like planning those conversations of what you want to do around the holidays with your family and friends, we also want to plan if we have a day that is too tough, and that it doesn't mean that we're weak if it's a day that we feel we can't handle. This is hard and it hurts. And we're human. So these are some things that we can do, to have this rescue plan in place before we get to our holidays and before we get to that tough day. But who is your rescue person? Who is the person that you're going to call? Who is that contact? If I get to the holidays and I just can't handle it, that doesn't mean you're weak. It just means it's tough. Who are you going to call? And if you cannot name one person right now, then you have homework. You have homework, and you have to find that one person. There's no reason anyone should be without one person. We can join a community, we can join a club, we can join a church, we can join a temple, we can join a safe community and supportive community to find one if you don't have one. But you have to let that one know that if the holiday is too tough, I might call you, because you don't want to be calling them and they never answer, but it's because they didn't know, or you didn't know they were going to be out of town and not have service. So please, please think about who's your person and let them know. Also, what helps you with holiday stress? Ask yourself, what helps me with stress? What helps me with stress in the past? What helps me manage it? What helps me release it? And that is, ask yourself that. Maybe it's been a while since you had experienced really tough stress, but whatever works for that stress can definitely help. Some of us need a nap. Some of us need a jog. Some of us need a song. Some of us need to play that song or write that song. Some of us need to pray. Some of us need to meditate. Some of us just need to breathe. And so we need to write down what helps us. And it'll be different for everyone. The other thing is, how do I know I am taking care of myself? Am I taking my medicine, or am I taking too much because I'm not paying attention? So we need to have a way of making sure. I am not ashamed to say I use a pill box. I am young still, but I use a pill box like my grandma. So if you need that to make sure that you are not taking too much medicine or not forgetting your medicine, do that. You need an alarm. You need a sticky note. whatever it is that you need to make sure. Also, ask yourself right now, and I always get a response, who has not had one sip of water today? I know some of you will be raising your hands, and that's not good. We need hydration. When we are experiencing added stress from grief, we need that flushed out. Nothing does it better than water. So how can I make sure I'm drinking enough water? Put a cup, a glass, a bottle, and if it's still full, you know you're not hydrating enough. So you have to learn how I'm gonna manage my physical needs. Give yourself permission to enjoy something. What is something that you take pleasure in? Is it dessert? Is it shopping? Is it a nap? Is it, what is it? What is something that makes you smile? And when we're grieving, sometimes we feel like we can't. We feel guilty. Our loved one can't, so we can't. But this is part of self-care, And so again, it has to be within reason. If shopping makes you feel good, but you're broke because you paid for a funeral and you don't have that income anymore, give yourself $5 and go to a thrift store or yard sale and find the best deal. There's always a way around, and to support yourself. What did you do in the past to relax, to get comfort, or to get energized? And then also, what are some books, movies that you watch, books that you read that help you, cheer you up, that give you energy, that help you relax? And then what is something new you want to try? Maybe because of your loved one's death, there's something that you need to try that's new, that is without them. And it may be difficult. Maybe it's going to that family party. Maybe it's going to that function. And you have to try it. And it's not easy. But give yourself permission. Maybe you have to have a meal alone in public. Maybe. So it's okay if you have to. But maybe you need someone to help you. Maybe you need to try. And also ask yourself if you can afford it. Because you don't want to do something that you can't afford. And then taking care of yourself doesn't mean that you're forgetting your loved one. I always say that because sometimes we feel guilty that our loved one, that we're beginning to smile again, that we are beginning to heal. And that is not bad. That is not. And I will just not dare say that our loved one would want that for us, or our loved one would not want that, because I don't know your loved one. And I don't know your relationship, and I would never want to be disrespectful. But I just want you to be aware that taking care of yourself, healing, does not mean you're forgetting your loved one. Those are separate things. Taking care of yourself, initially we are surviving life without them, physically in our life, and then we are going to try and heal. Those are just very, very important. So then, after the self-care rescue plan, we want to make sure, again, write it down. Write it down. So that's a note to self. Write my rescue plan down. Because if you say it in your head, you're not going to do it. But if you write it down, you might do it. Put it on the fridge. So make sure that you write it down. Here are some ways that we can remember and reflect on our loved one. And I have so many people that I love around the holidays that are living, but I also have some people that I love that are no longer living. And I love to remember them and think about them. And so Here are some ways that a family can heal. We can have some quiet time and moments of silence if we need it. It's okay. We just want to let our loved ones and our friends and family know, I need some space. I need some quiet time. I will be safe. But I just need some time alone. And we may need that time alone to honor them, to cry for them, just to be with our grief. And that's okay to do that this holiday. We want to give a gift in their memory sometimes. There were times that I would pick someone that reminded me of my loved one, and I would give them a gift, and I would tell them, you did this, you said something, you were kind like them, and it reminded me, so I just want to give you this gift in their memory. Or you can give a financial gift to an organization in their memory. Photos. Now, not everyone can see photos of their loved ones. So we have to respect where people are. But if we need a photo, it's okay. Hang it up. There's ornaments that you can put your loved one's photo in. If you don't celebrate with a Christmas tree or you don't celebrate Christmas, you can get an ornament holder and put that photo. And so, photos can be very healing and they can be very special reminders. Not everybody uses them, but some do. Then the social media. Now you have to be careful. And I know we are streaming, but on social media, never expect the social media to be your support group. Now you can receive support there, and that is new because in my younger days we did not have social media. So it is new for me, but I have learned, many of those that I serve do use social media, and they can use it as a support group if it's in a support group setting. There are online peer support groups, but they're usually closed, invite only, and private. But sometimes, if we post something and it can be helpful, and it can be honoring, and it can be really awesome. But there could always be someone that has something to say. So you don't want to expect social media to be your support group. I had someone, my father died 25 years ago. Do I still love him 25 years later? Of course. Is he still my dad 25 years later? Of course. Have I learned to live without a dad for 25 years? Of course. Do I still wish he was living? Of course. So on Father's Day, I am going to share about him. On his birthday, I'm going to share about him. And I've had people that will say something like, you're a grief counselor and you are still posting all these years later? Yes, I am. So I'm not going to expect that to be my support group. But I can use it. But I just like to use that disclosure because people can, be at different places. They may not understand. And you know what? The person that said that has their dad. So they have no idea. And so we just want to be careful what we say, but also we want to be careful that we don't expect that to be our only means of support because it can be hurtful. The other ways that we can do remembrance and reflection is a space at the table. And some people don't want to do that. Some people are like, no, that's too sad. Some people will. And it's just all, again, having those conversations and compromising what we want to do together. But you may want to put a space and maybe put, something that people can write messages on. But put a space at the table. Or just put something that honors them. that's specifically for them, especially if they were present physically at that holiday table. Counseling and listening to other stories, like in a support group setting, that can be very helpful. And the counseling, I encourage everyone, if this is tough for you and you need help, or if it's something especially traumatic or tragic, or if there is family conflict and limited support, please seek the help of a counselor. And make sure that they are grief or trauma trained. You can ask them, because there's a lot of counselors that will say they can help support grief, but then if you ask them, well, did you receive any specific training for grief counseling? And they'll say no. So I always want to make sure that they are trained. Grief is not a mental illness. Remember, it's a reaction. It can impact us. And so we may find ourselves needing support, but it is not an illness. It can be complicated and complex, and sometimes there's underlying health conditions, and so it can definitely impact that, and we may need intervention. But grief itself is not the illness. We also can use candlelight, and I'm going to give an example when we do our musical tribute, and we'll light a candle for our loved ones. And then the rituals of remembrance. I love rituals of remembrance, and I had to learn how to do that. But the things that we miss about our loved ones hurt so much to remember early on. But in time, the things we remember about our loved ones are the things that will give us comfort and joy when we think about them. And so they will hurt, but we keep practicing those rituals. So that way, in time, it'll be something that comforts us, and it's something that we can still hold on to. Then we want to celebrate the gifts they left us. Sometimes those gifts are not just physical, tangible things, but they may be gifts that are experiences. I mean, like, I have this memory of my dad and I, when I was naughty as a teenager, or we were going through things, or I was mad, or he would take me for ice cream. And yeah, I didn't deserve the ice cream, but he would get me in the car, he would go and grab ice cream. And that ice cream would kind of break the tension, and so it would get me to talk. Because I would be eating the ice cream, he would eat his ice cream, and then he would say, "What's going on?" And it would be so easy to talk after that. And so those memories, like of ice cream talks, I love them, and I miss them still. Sometimes I could use an ice cream talk. And so, that tradition, I love that, and that gift that he gave me, he's no longer here. He can no longer physically buy ice cream for me and have a deep conversation. But I can remember that, and that's still a gift that he left me. And then we want to continue some of those traditions that they set for us. Scrapbooks are really, really helpful for some. Not everyone, but scrapbooking can be really helpful, especially at a holiday setting. You can put out a scrapbook and ask everyone, bring a photo of our loved one, at this holiday that you have, and then you put together a scrapbook of them. And then invite God to your grief journey. So some of us may be very distant from our faith, and for those of you that practice a faith tradition, and maybe you've been distanced from God because, of what has happened. But go ahead and just invite your faith, invite God, even if you're angry, because it can be very helpful in resolving some spiritual conflict. Then prayers or meditation in your own faith tradition, it can be helpful. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It can just be where you are at in your journey. But I have found through the years in supporting people, again, these aren't always prayers that are, you know, worshipful. Sometimes they're very angry prayers, but very honest. And so I think that is helpful in healing as well. And ornaments, even if you don't celebrate Christmas, trees, you know, or if you celebrate a different holiday, an ornament can be very helpful. You can decorate it, you can design it, or it can have a symbol that means something, and you can just use an ornament holder. Taking a break. So there are sometimes people that say, I don't want to celebrate this holiday season, we're going to go on vacation. And the whole family's upset. I would never tell anyone don't do that. I would just say, you're going to choose it. You're going to compromise. You're going to communicate with the family, and you're going to compromise. So you're going to let them know in advance, I am not going to be at this holiday, you know, meal because I'm going on vacation. I can't afford it. I'm going on vacation with my family because we need a break. That's not bad. It is not bad. It's just how it's done, how you do it, how you communicate. And if you're doing it in a healthy way and if you can afford it and it's not adding stress. But just think about when someone has broken their leg, you know, and you have to elevate it, you have to be off of it, you can't walk on it, you can't put weight on it. So think of a vacation like that. Sometimes people need a break from life just to catch their breath, and then they come back. The problem is that sometimes people are constantly on vacation and never come back and deal and process the grief. So that's the tricky part. Starting a new tradition. Ooh, that one's hard. I know. Just saying it sometimes. I don't want a new tradition. I want the old one with my loved one. I get it. I do too. But sometimes we have to start a new tradition because maybe they were the ones that made that tradition and it's just not the same. So we have to start a new one. And that may not happen early on, and that's okay. But in time, you may want to start a new one together. And then make something good happen in their memory. That's my favorite. I believe something good can come out of something tragic. It takes a lot of will, it takes intention, it takes hope, and it just takes just doing it and learning how. But I really do believe that good things can come from something tragic. I don't believe that, again, this is my own personal belief, but I don't believe that God allowed my loved ones to die so young and tragically so I could become, you know, work in grief and loss. But something good did come from me being able to, going through those experiences. It forced me to seek help for myself. And then that, you know, really inspired me to help others in that same way that I was helped. But I believe that, you know, and I honor my loved ones through my work. I believe something good came out of it, something tragic. And I try to make something good come out of something tragic. And I always encourage and invite you to do the same. It doesn't have to be something big. It can be something small, you know. And just one thing my dad would always tell me is that, you know, try to make, you know, someone smile every day. Try to learn something every day, you know. And I hear that advice and try to do that, you know. And you can make someone smile and in our loved one's memory. And next is, where do you turn? I always just like to encourage people to know, because this is a huge question. I don't need help. Well, how do you know? I don't. I don't need help. I'm fine. Well, how do you know? How do you know that you don't need help? Because I think we all need help sometimes. I've needed help. But how do we know? And here's a few questions and that you can ask yourself. You know, I'm not able to do my things that I'm supposed to do every day. You know, just those tasks that we do every day for life, for work. And I can't do them. Or I'm constantly thinking of my loved one. I'm always thinking of them. I cannot think about anyone else. I can't think of anyone living. I can only think of my loved one that has died. Or the symptoms, and I call them symptoms in this situation, even though it's not an illness, but they are so excessive. I'm having physical symptoms, I'm having mental health symptoms, spiritual conflicts, and they're very excessive. And then also, you might be having nightmares that are waking you up. You might have excessive anger, that it's now rage, and you can't manage it well, and you have outbursts, and there's negative consequences. Are you excessively abusing substance? And that's a hard one to answer because most people will say no. But is there someone that you trust whose answer might be yes? Try it. Try asking that person you trust. You know, am I excessively using substance? And I never tell anyone you can't drink, you know, at the holidays, but I always just say be careful because you're vulnerable. And, you know, substance or alcohol can have a numbing effect. And sometimes we can get used to that or desire it or want it, and it can lead to trouble. So just be very careful with yourself. And then the thoughts to harm yourself or others. If we have thoughts to harm ourselves or others, we definitely need help. And if we cannot move forward. And it doesn't mean that you have to move forward quickly. You can move forward very slowly. Like, if you've ever seen a fox cross the road, it's really fast. If you've ever seen a deer cross the road, they usually start off very slow and want everyone to stop for them, but they get across. You probably have never seen a turtle or a snail cross the road because they're really small, but if you were walking and you saw them, they would cross the road eventually, but really slow. So it's okay if you're moving slow as long as you're moving. But if you're not able to move forward, then you need help. So these are some things to ask ourselves, and these are the type of professionals or helpers that we would seek. If we're having emotional, you would seek a counselor. Sometimes you see they're called licensed counselors or social workers, grief counselors, psychologists, and that's the type of help you would seek. If it's mental health or physical health, you would seek a physician, a psychiatrist, could help, a psychologist, psychotherapist, but you would probably need advanced clinicians for any substance, thoughts of harm, anxiety, depression, or when you can't do your daily activities. And if you're having something, you know, spiritual conflicts that are really difficult, you can seek spiritual care or support from a chaplain or clergy or pastor in your own faith tradition, or a spiritual direction counselor. And then anytime there's an emergency, you can always call 911 or any of these helplines. The suicide prevention hotline is 988. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, 800-799-7233. And any psychiatric hospital walk-in clinic, hospital emergency room, or urgent care clinics. I always encourage, please seek help. You are worth helping. And help doesn't happen quickly either. So I always tell everyone, be patient. It sometimes takes a while to find the right fit, but you're worth helping and you're worth waiting for. So please, please do that. And the last thing, I really wish everyone, the next holiday, I mean, there is Halloween, and that's a fun holiday, but Thanksgiving Thanksgiving is a really personal holiday. And then we're gonna close with the music tribute, and we will light candles for our loved ones. Thank you. And it's okay to say our loved one's name and light a candle in their memory and their honor. And so we light a candle for our loved ones this holiday season, those that will be missed, those that are missed, and those that are still loved. And that concludes our workshop. I hope you gained some helpful information for your grief journey. Thank you.